Chapter 18. Stakeout. The station was the noisiest she had heard it in a while. At one point, Yvonne put a hand over each ear. Everyone was hyped up, double-checking they had all their equipment and it was fully functional, phones and radios fully charged. Uniform and CID alike buzzed with purpose. The briefing room was more full than she had ever seen it. It was normally empty this time in the early evening, or else the late shift would be having their short briefing. DCI Llewellyn entered in full uniform, chest out. There was no smile. His face muscles were unusually stiff. He had the air of someone holding his breath. He waited for the noise to die down, clearing his throat to speed up the process. "All right, everybody." His eyes flicked around to every other pair in the room. "Today is an important day for all of us. SOCA have been working with GCHQ and detected chatter they believe is linked with the group VORTEX. They think there is a strong possibility they are going to target our area again, and they believe the threat is imminent." He looked down at his papers, pursing his lips. There was silence around the room, as everyone waited for him to continue. The Festival of Light in Delaru Park is thought to be a strong candidate for an attempted abduction. It will be heavily attended by families from all over this part of Powys. This means we need to be on our toes. The council have switched the CCTV back on. We'll have 6 CID officers and as many non-uniformed constables patrolling the park. You'll be our main eyes and ears. There'll be a riot van present, as a complete absence of policing would likely make them suspicious. The van will have its own CCTV and be parked up outside of Oriel Gallery, to the right of the park gates. Most people will be entering through our main car park, so this van may have the clearer view. Once more the DCI sought eye contact with every officer in the room. While Yvonne nodded encouragement, Llewellyn continued, "Keep your eyes and your wits about you. This group is brazen, and we don't know what arms they may be carrying. Don't wade in. If you see anything, call it in first and let everybody know you need backup. Look out for each other and prioritise public safety at all times. Yvonne, you'll be coordinating your team on the ground and liaising with Inspector Griffiths regarding his uniform officers. You have a hotline to me and I have a hotline to SOCA. If anything else comes in, if I get any more intel, I will be sharing it with you if I am able. Okay, everybody? Get your stuff together and get out there. Be safe." A cold rain was falling, whipped around by a gusty wind. It stung her face as she left the station. She envied the uniform officers piling into vans and cars. They could do that. Visible policing. She and her colleagues, however, would be walking the path parallel to the river, entering the park from the opposite direction. She wrapped her coat tightly around herself, turning the collar up and adjusting her earpiece until it felt more comfortable. She turned her volume right down until she needed it. There was a lot of chatter as officers sorted out last-minute prep, and she found it jarring. "Ready?" Dewi joined her, starting down the park path. Callum and Di would be following on, several minutes behind. Yvonne looked up at the sky. "Do you think there'll be much of a turnout in this?" Dewi tilted his head. "Hard to say, but if children have set their hearts on it, then it'll take brave parents to tell them they can't go because of the weather." The DI pushed her hands deep into her coat pockets, burrowing her chin into the high woolen neck. As they approached the main field, they could see cars already entering the car park, their occupants wisely reluctant to get out straight away. Perhaps the rain would let up soon. Yvonne turned a full 360-degree circle to get eyes on every bit of the park she could. It was quiet now, but would soon be teeming with people. Where would they be most likely to come from, Dewi? "That's the problem, isn't it?" Dewi frowned. "This place is so bloody open. If it was a football ground, we'd only have one entrance point to concentrate on." Yvonne nodded. "We've got a car park, the main gates, Park Street entrance, the pathway from the estates, and the walkways along the river." She turned her volume up, now that the calls from the other officers had died down. "I think I'll put Callum on the river paths and Di on the park gates. If you monitor the Park Street entrance, I'll cover the main car park and the toilet area. Debbie and Mark," she referred to 2 DCs, "you can go amongst the crowd." Debbie nodded. "I'll let everybody know." Yvonne left him to carry out her instructions while she headed towards the car park toilets. The rain had stopped and the wind had quietened down. The moon broke through in patches. She checked for mace in her pocket. cuffs in her left pocket, mace in her right, as though some dark force might extract them without her knowledge. She relaxed at their feel. She had chosen sturdy flat shoes, though she was wearing a skirt beneath her long coat. The earlier biting rain had her regretting that wardrobe choice. She had felt it would make her less obvious. She took a seat on the long, low wall that divided the town centre from the park. To her front right was the toilet block, and beyond that, the main car park. Directly ahead of her, a large grass area with pavement. Behind her, the town lights and the busy road leading to Back Lane. People approached from every direction, and there were a lot of families, small children, clutching fluorescent tubes or else holding up rotating kaleidoscope fans, their colour patterns constantly changing. She had to be careful not to stare too long for fear of seeing those patterns in front of her eyes. She thought of her nephew and niece, Tom and Sally. They would have loved this. She was glad they were not here. "Everything okay?" She spoke into the microphone inside the high collar of her coat. Several replies came back from around the field. All quiet, nothing out of the ordinary. If she was a smoker, she would have lit up. She felt out of place sitting alone on the wall. She made the crowd searching obvious, as though she were waiting for someone. From Back Lane direction to her right, a procession of large lanterns approached. Each was the shape of an animal. There were fish, birds, and larger mammals. Each lantern was carried by 2 people, and the long line made for an impressive sight. A cheer went up from the crowd, and she could hear the excitement of the children. She looked back at the main crowd. To date, only teenagers had been taken, and it was these she monitored most. The smallest children tended to be holding their guardians' hands, or else were on their father's shoulders. No, it was the young teenagers who VORTEX appeared to be targeting. They would be most likely to be on the fringes of the crowd, shunning their parents' hands, or else just shunning their parents. "Do you mind if I sit here?" The question made her jump. A woman in her 30s had sat on the wall next to her, searching her bag for something. A look of relief flooded her face as she removed her mobile phone and punched a number into it. Yvonne was unsure whether she minded. On the one hand, the close presence of another was comforting. On the other, she had a job to do, and the woman was partially obscuring her view. The lady herself was clearly not worried either way. The smell of burger and onions wafted across the field, and a band was playing somewhere on the field. She stood up. The crowd was now at such a level she needed to start walking around to properly monitor it. Lots of people were in dark clothing and had their hoods up. If potential abductors were among the crowds, they were going to be much harder to spot. Once or twice she followed young men she felt looked suspicious, but nothing came of it. Over an hour passed like this before the rain came again. A huge whale lantern with a thick wooden frame had been purposely set alight. It lit up the field and warmed the crowd's faces. It created loud whooshing noises whenever a gust of wind blew through it. The DI's feet ached and her eyes hurt from the smoke and the searching. She needed a hot drink and her bed. The burning whale over, the crowd began to disperse. This was another danger period. Yvonne refocused, walking faster among the disappearing crowd. Nothing. The radio was silent. Bedraggled officers filed in for the 9 o'clock debrief. Their faces said it all. Shoulders hunched, saying little, they removed bits of kit, throwing them into their lockers and handing in dying batteries. Yvonne knew how they felt. There wasn't a single officer there who would have wanted a child to be under threat. But equally, they had all wanted to catch someone in the attempt, make some headway with the case. Tired, wet and hungry, she overheard one uniformed officer say it had been a crapshoot and that Soka needed to get their facts straight. Whereas the room had been hyper only hours before, it was now a morgue. As Llewellyn thanked them all for their participation, "At least we can say that no one was abducted, and that may have been down to your vigilance." "I don't think they tried for this event, sir." Di Clayton rose from his chair to leave. Llewellyn nodded. "You may be right. Either way, you did a good job out there, and people were reassured by the visible presence of uniform." Yvonne walked up to the DCI. "It can't be helped, sir. I know. I think everyone thought we might get a result. They'll be fine in the morning." Llewellyn nodded. "Before you go, Yvonne, Soka have asked that we stake out Newtown Winter Fair next week." "The 15th? "Yes, it's the other event where they thought an abduction attempt might take place. Is that a problem?" Yvonne thought about it. The 15th was her birthday. Her 40th birthday. The big 40. She'd been looking forward to doing something with Kim and the children. Her eyes soulful, she thought of the youngsters held captive, thought of their sadness, loneliness and fear. She thought of their parents and the utter terror they must be feeling. She raised those soulful eyes to the DCI's. "No, Chris, it's not a problem. I'll prep the team. We'll be ready."